Welcome to the Shorten Anime channel. Today we'll dive into the latest episode of The Great Ruler. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support the channel. The Great Ruler, Season 1, Episode 35. In the training grounds, the atmosphere turned into an uproar due to the sudden and explosive news. Everyone's gaze fixated onto the figure of the young boy. Spiritual rotation stage? Although there were many excellent students within the current Northern Spiritual Academy who have reached the critical point of their breakthroughs, there was only one person who managed to advance into that level. Based on everybody's knowledge, that person is the West Branch's Liu Mubai. He is also the strongest student within the Northern Spiritual Academy. However, a second one had appeared in the East Branch now. At the side, Mo Ling and the others stared blankly at Mu Chen. Then he immediately let out a bitter laugh. Previously, he still tried to show off, yet he never knew that Mu Chen had left him in the dust a long time ago. What an insane person! Mo Ling and Tan Xingshan exchanged gazes with each other and saw this thought emerging from within their eyes. Especially the latter one. He had originally ascended to Heaven class together with Mu Chen. However, right now he had only reached spiritual movement stage middle phase, yet Mu Chen had already surpassed him by far. He really is a tough nut to beat. Chen Fan and Huo Yun's expression became solemn. Although the spiritual energy within their Orisia had shown traces of condensing into a wheel, they were still quite far from reaching the actual spiritual rotation stage. Staring at the boy in front of them wearing a calm and composed expression, they were flabbergasted. It seems that this competitor would be difficult to deal with. Teacher Mo waved his hand and stopped the noise within the training grounds. He stared deeply at Mu Chen before saying, "Although you managed to enter the spiritual rotation stage, you should still remain in the Northern Spiritual Academy during the next month. It would probably be beneficial to you as well." After hearing this, Mu Chen's heart moved slightly. He looked at Teacher Mo and nodded his head without saying anything. "All right, everyone should train by themselves now. Mu Chen, follow me for a moment." Teacher Mo waved his hands and left the training's grounds. Seeing this, Mu Chen immediately followed him. With the departure of these two men, the training grounds became an uproar completely. It was evident that they were still immersed in the shock that Mu Chen had already advanced into the spiritual rotation stage. Mu Chen ignored the uproar that he had caused and walked forward. Then he saw Teacher Mo with his hands behind his back. "Mu Chen, I think that you should be able to guess why our Northern Spiritual Academy obtained a seated class entry." Teacher Mo laughed as he looked at Mu Chen. Although the latter was only a youthful boy, he understood that Mu Chen was quite mature and more cautious than any battle-hardened veterans. "Is it because of me?" Mu Chen indeed managed to predict it a bit. A seated class entry was considerably rare even within the 100 Spirit Heavens, not to mention about the Northern Spiritual Realm. Therefore, it would not have landed within the Northern Spiritual Academy unless of a special reason. Teacher Mo nodded his head and said, "Indeed, it is related to you. However, Principal Xiao does not intend to hand the seated entry to you directly. I understand, that thing is too attractive. If it was handed over to me, it wouldn't be good to the Northern Spiritual Academy." Mu Chen was not particularly surprised. The Northern Spiritual Academy has always remained neutral if it were to be given to him so easily. Others probably would not see things favorably. And Mu Chen let out a laugh. The boy's smile seemed to be a little bit conceited, yet it did not annoy anyone. "Since it belongs to me, I will rely on myself to obtain it. I don't need others generously gifting it to me." Teacher Mo was stunned for a moment. He couldn't resist laughing out loud, and a hint of admiration passed through his eyes. "You sure feel confident about it? If you're competing to obtain the seated class entry, you should know who is the greatest opponent for you, right?" "Liu Mubai," Mu Chen shrugged. Although that person was indeed quite annoying, Mu Chen had to admit that he had quite the strength. "Do you know Liu Mubai's strength?" Teacher Mo asked again. He should have advanced into the spiritual rotation stage a long time ago. Although the rumors within the Northern Spiritual Academy say that he is in the spiritual rotation stage, initial phase, I feel that he is probably stronger than that. Mu Chen thought for a moment before saying this. He had fought against Liu Mubai earlier, and the latter had definitely concealed a part of his strength. Yes, Liu Mubai currently might be in the spiritual rotation stage middle phase. Teacher Mo nodded and he spoke. As expected, Mu Chen narrowed his eyes. He was indeed a formidable opponent. However, he had also advanced into the spiritual rotation stage right now. Mu Chen wasn't exactly afraid of him if they had to fight. Moreover, Liu Mubai refused Teacher Shi's personal guidance when he heard about the news of a seeded class entry and headed straight back to the Liu territory. Furthermore, he even took 1 month off, Teacher Mo said with a faint smile. He refused Teacher Shi's guidance? Mu Chen was slightly surprised. Teacher Shi was still a genuine spirit stage powerhouse. Ordinary students would not be able to receive his personal guidance, yet Liu Mubai actually ignored it? There must be a reason why he chose to do this. It means that he believes that the Liu territory has some sort of method to greatly improve his strength, Teacher Mo said softly. Mu Chen nodded his head seriously. Although Liu Qingtian was a spirit stage powerhouse, he did not believe that Liu Qingtian would be better than Teacher Shi if it was about guidance for cultivation. Then where did this belief of his come from? Mu Chen bit his lips as he felt a sense of crisis. The most frightening thing were the unknown facts. During this 1 month, I will also teach you personally. Of course, if you believe that you will be able to improve more rapidly in the Mu territory, I will not stop you. Teacher Mo smiled as he spoke. Teacher Mo, don't joke around. Although my father is also at the spirit stage, he has never taught others regarding cultivation. He is not good at it, Mu Chen said helplessly. Mu Feng's strength might be stronger than Teacher Mo's, but he was not suitable to teach others about cultivation. Teacher Mo smiled and said, since that's the case, I will personally teach you during this 1 month. But before this, I will first talk about the compensation that the Northern Spiritual Academy would be handing to you. Compensation? Mu Chen was startled. He immediately shook his head and said, is it about the seeded class entry? Teacher Mo, the Northern Spiritual Academy, did not do anything wrong. Moreover, I do not feel that I've lost anything. Oh ho ho, Principal Xiao was the one to say it. No matter what, you are the reason why the Northern Spiritual Academy obtained this seeded class entry. If you think that compensation does not sound good, then you can change it to a reward. Teacher Mo smiled. Then fine. Mu Chen scratched his head and did not refuse it anymore. Since the Northern Spiritual Academy was going to give him some benefits, it would be too pretentious if he continued to reject it. Then follow me to the Spiritual Arts Room. Teacher Mo smiled. Spiritual Arts Room? Mu Chen was stunned. Weren't you interested in the Spiritual Arts Room's 3rd floor? This time, I'll let you enter it. Teacher Mo gave a faint laugh before turning around and walking away. The Spiritual Arts Room's 3rd floor? Mu Chen licked his lips. A hint of delight surged out from his eyes. The Spiritual Arts Room's 3rd floor contains the most powerful spiritual arts within the Northern Spiritual Academy's collection. The collection over there must be many times more bountiful than his father's collection. It seems that the Northern Spiritual Academy really decided to pay a price. The Spiritual Arts Room's 3rd floor is a place that very few students would be able to enter. At that location, the spiritual arts were all at least spiritual tier. Mu Chen's heart was filled with excitement, and he quickly followed. He followed Teacher Mo as they went all the way through the Northern Spiritual Academy and directly entered the Spiritual Arts Room. Then they headed straight toward the 2nd floor. At this moment, a few heaven-class students were searching through spiritual arts. They were surprised when they saw Teacher Mo bringing Mu Chen up here. Mu Chen! A voice came from the side, and Mu Chen looked over towards the red dress. It was evident that the charming Hong Ling was staring at him with her mouth slightly open. Senior Hong Ling. Mu Chen gave a slight smile and directed a nod towards Hong Ling. However, he did not say much more and directly followed Teacher Mo to the depths of the 2nd floor. At that location, there was a faint light barrier. A dense spiritual energy fluctuation emitted out from the light barrier. The two of them stopped in front of the light barrier and caused the students on the 2nd floor to turn their gaze over at them. They knew that this was the passageway to the Spiritual Art Room's 3rd floor. However, no students were ever permitted to enter. Teacher Mo, what are you doing? A few heaven-class students stared in astonishment at Teacher Mo and Mu Chen. Their eyes flashed as if they understood. Then a surge of surprise filled their eyes. No way! While they exclaimed in a low voice, Teacher Mo waved his sleeves and cracks slowly appeared on the light barrier. However, just when he was about to bring Mu Chen in, a voice suddenly rang out from behind. Teacher Mo, why is he allowed to enter the 3rd floor? Teacher Mo stopped for a moment and turned around. He could see many heaven-class students staring angrily over at this location. Moreover, many of their eyes were filled with jealousy and unwillingness. They had longed to enter the Spiritual Arts Room 3rd floor, yet they were not qualified to enter. However, seeing Teacher Mo bring Mu Chen in, it instantly imbalanced their psychological state. Teacher Mo swept his eyes across them and said in a faint voice, "This is because his performance in the spiritual road has helped us to secure the first ever seeded class entry for the Northern Spiritual Academy. Is this reason enough?" The entire spiritual arts room's second floor instantly became silent. Numerous incredulous gazes began to fixate themselves onto Mu Chen. So the first ever seeded class entry of the Northern Spiritual Academy came because of him? Wasn't he kicked out of the spiritual road halfway through? Why would the 5 great academies still purposely hand over a seeded class entry to the Northern Spiritual Academy? Hong Ling could not help but conceal her lips with her slender hand. She immediately stared complicatedly at the boy who had become the center of attention. The boy that had been ordinary within her eyes had slowly emitted out heat and light, causing him to become dazzling. Seeing that nobody was questioning him anymore, Teacher Mo waved his hand and walked past the light barrier. Mu Chen also followed him immediately. After the 2 individuals disappeared behind the light barrier, the spiritual arts room's second floor was still completely silent. It was evident that they were still immersed in the shock brought by the sudden news. The 3rd floor of the spiritual arts room was not as luxurious as imagined by Mu Chen. Instead, it was quite simple. It seemed like an ordinary attic, yet the spotless floor made others understand the importance of this place to the Northern Spiritual Academy due to its maintenance. It was the first time Mu Chen had entered the treasured location, which every single Northern Spiritual Academy student would drool about, and he immediately looked around curiously. Teacher Mo walked forward. In the center of the attic, there was a bluestone platform. A delicate jade box was placed neatly on top of the bluestone platform. He waved his hand and the jade box opened. A light slowly floated out and many jaded scripts of different color were within the light. "These are all spiritual tier, spiritual art. You can pick from them." Teacher Mo stared at Mu Chen and smiled. "These are all spiritual tier, spiritual arts?" Mu Chen stared at the dozen lights and could not help but smack his lips. As expected from the Northern Spiritual Academy, this collection was many times more powerful than his father's collection. Mu Chen hurriedly walked up and eagerness filled his eyes. He did not train in many spiritual arts right now, and the only one that could be displayed was the limitless Death Seal. Moreover, it may have a high potential, but it was still common tier. As for the Great Pagoda art, it was too profound. It also could not bring obvious benefits to Mu Chen currently. Therefore, he needed this level of spiritual art to increase his combat abilities. Otherwise, he did not believe he would be able to defeat Lu Mubai, who returned to the Lu territory to prepare. 1 month later, Mu Chen stretched out his hand, and a clump of light appeared within his hand. The light faded away, and a brown-colored jaded script floated out. He glanced at it for a moment. Earth Spirit Wave, Spiritual Tier, Low Rank. This seems to be a script for a spiritual tier, low-rank attack spiritual art. Mu Chen pondered for a moment, yet he shook his head. Although this spiritual art was pretty good, it did not feel like it suited him. Mu Chen lowered the spiritual art within his hand and looked at the other ones. Teacher Mo stood at a corner and quietly watched. After 10 minutes since Mu Chen had started the selection, his eyes had finally lit up. Then he stared in great interest at the jaded script in his hand. This jaded script was a faint cyan color. However, it was not an attack spiritual art, but a movement spiritual art. Moreover, its rank was not that low as well. Shadow Spirit Step, spiritual rank, middle rank. If this spiritual art was to be trained to the Great Achievement stage, your figure would be like a spirit while the after images would confuse others. It was also untraceable. Mu Chen had learned a few movement spiritual arts before, but these movement spiritual arts were too ordinary. It was still the first time for him to see one of this level. Done? You really have a pretty good discerning eye. You've picked one of the few spiritual tier, middle rank spiritual arts. Seeing this, Teacher Mo let out a faint smile and spoke. Mu Chen smiled embarrassedly before he stared at the spiritual arts reluctantly. He actually also took a liking to an attack spiritual art. However, it would seem that he was too greedy if he picked another one. You've taken a liking to another one? However, Teacher Mo still noticed his expression and immediately frowned as he asked. Mu Chen smiled awkwardly. I originally planned on letting you select one spiritual art as compensation. Teacher Mo stared at the resentful Mu Chen that was rubbing his head. He thought about it for a moment before he said with a smile, However, I can make an exception to it and allow you to select one more. However, there is a condition. What is the condition? Mu Chen hurriedly asked. You must guarantee that you'll defeat Liu Mubai and let the Northern Spiritual Academy East Branch obtain the seeded class entry, Teacher Mo said. Eh? Mu Chen was surprised for a moment. This was originally his goal. He stared at Teacher Mo's eyes that contained a smile and seemed to have understood the meaning behind it. He immediately nodded his head. Don't worry, Teacher Mo. I will not let others obtain what belongs to me. Teacher Mo smiled as he waved his head. Since that's the case, then I'll watch your performance. Choose it. Mu Chen nodded his head gratefully. Then he did not hesitate and grabbed onto a jaded script amongst the ones that he had looked at. Ancient light writings emerged on top of the jaded script. Spirit King Finger, Spiritual Tier, Low Rank. It walks down the path of fierceness and hardness. Moreover, it allows the finger to be like metal and could fracture bones. This was a spiritual art that trains the fingers. Mu Chen was quite interested in it. In the past, he had trained in a threat-level finger spiritual art. He was extremely satisfied with this type of attack, which was sharp and lethal without using weapons. Oh, it's actually a finger spiritual art? Teacher Mo was also stunned for a moment when he noticed Mu Chen selecting this spiritual art. It was quite painful to train in this sort of spiritual art. This is because it requires you to train solely your fingers. Moreover, during the training period, the pain caused by training your fingers was not something an ordinary person could endure. After all, the nerves of the fingertips are linked with the heart. I've gotten accustomed to it. Mu Chen smiled. There was no power that you could obtain without effort. If you want to obtain it, you would naturally have to pay a price. Teacher Mo nodded his head. He felt even more satisfied regarding the boy in front of him. He has talent, yet he was not conceited, nor was he reckless. He could endure what ordinary people could not endure. A boy like this was considered to be the most excellent student he had seen through the many years of teaching in the Northern Spiritual Academy. During this 1 month, I will help you with the training of these 2 spiritual arts and allow you to succeed in it as soon as possible. Teacher Mo waved his hand before he walked out of the building. I will not disappoint Teacher Mo. Mu Chen stared at the back of Teacher Mo and nodded his head heavily. He was not a person who would only talk about how grateful he is to another person. Teacher Mo had helped him greatly, so what he needed to do was not to disappoint him. It would be enough if he snatches the seeded class entry away. Liu Mubai, let us have a good fight this time. Liu territory, inside the Liu estate. Seeded class entry? Within the room, the Liu territory lord, Liu Qingtian, immediately sat up when he heard these words. He stared in surprise while revealing a hint of excitement at Liu Mubai as he said, how is it possible for the Northern Spiritual Academy to obtain a seeded class entry? I'm not too sure as well. Liu Mubai shook his head and said, however, it is indeed true. A seeded class entry. This is probably the first time that the Northern Spiritual Academy has obtained it, right? If Liu Mubai is able to obtain the seeded class entry, he would definitely obtain better resources when he entered the 5 Great Academies. His achievements would also surpass ordinary 5 Great Academies students. Liu Zong was also shocked by the news, but he immediately said with a delighted expression, they were aware that a student who obtained the seeded class entry would be in a different level compared to an ordinary student. Ha ha ha, if Mubai becomes a seeded student in the 5 Great Academies, perhaps he would have reached the 3 heaven stage by the time he graduated. At that time, not only would the Liu territory become the Northern Spiritual Realm's lord, we would even obtain a decent position in the 100 Spirit Heavens. Liu Ming laughed. Liu Qingtian licked his lips and stared eagerly at Liu Mubai as he said, Mubai, no matter what price you have to pay, you must obtain the seeded class entry. That's right. Within the Northern Spiritual Academy, who is the most threatening opponent to you? Liu Mubai's eyes narrowed. He thought about the brief fight he had with Mu Chen in the Black Eerie Swamp. Although he had hid quite a bit of strength back then, he could feel with his instincts that Mu Chen seemed to have some other means as well. If there was still a student within the Northern Spiritual Academy that could cause him some uncertainty, it would probably be Mu Chen. Mu Chen, Liu Mubai replied. Dad, this Mu Chen had obtained the qualifications to the spiritual road before. We cannot underestimate him too much. Mu Chen? That boy? Hearing this name, Liu Qingtian's eyes turned cold. He remembered that Mu Chen had lured the devouring spirit bees over in the Black Eerie Swamp and helped Mu Feng solve their dilemma. Big brother, that boy is quite strange. Back then, Zhuetu went to kill him, who was only a spiritual movement stage middle phase. But in the end, he was the one who somehow died. Liu Ming also opened his mouth to speak. He could still remember deeply about the matter back then. Liu Qingtian nodded his head, and a hint of coldness immediately surged through his face. He said, "The seeded class entry must fall into the hands of the Liu territory. Otherwise, it would be a calamity. Therefore, we must not make any mistakes about this matter. Mubai, from today onwards, you will enter the forbidden lands behind the mountain. Your grandfather will assist you with your training." Liu Qingtian's eyes flashed, and he muttered, "Grandfather? Grandfather is inside the forbidden lands? Didn't he go missing 3 years ago?" Hearing this, Liu Mubai was surprised and became speechless. That is what is said at the outside. Your grandfather secluded himself to try and enter the three heavens stage. If we wait until that old man succeeds, wouldn't the northern spiritual realm be completely controlled by our Liu territory?" Liu Qingtian let out a dark laughing sound and said, "That group of idiots from the Mu territory thought that they would be safe if they hindered the Liu territory from obtaining the Nine Netherworld Bird. Just you wait. As long as your grandfather comes out, I will make Mu Feng kneel down in front of me like a dog. An upstart force wants to compare backgrounds with my Liu territory? What an idiotic dream." "Yes." Hearing this, Liu Mubai also had a hint of excitement flash through his eyes. If his grandfather could personally assist him, his strength would definitely increase greatly after 1 month. By then, who would care about Mu Chen? As he thought back about the shame that Mu Chen made him feel in the Black Eerie Swamp, Liu Mubai gritted his teeth tightly. A hint of cruelness appeared at his mouth. "At that time, I want to trample you fiercely in front of everybody's face, in front of everybody who had confidence in you. The most excellent youth in the northern spiritual realm is me, Liu Mubai, and not a trash like you." That wraps up the content for today's episode. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel to get notifications for the next episode. For now, goodbye, and see you next time.